Welcome into the Ultimate Cavaliers Show, coming to you, not live, this is pre-recorded, from the UCSS studio instead of from my lovely freezing cold apartment. It's just me today and my guy Anthony Antonelli, who's behind the glass helping direct and produce this in live time. So Ant, let's talk a little Cavaliers basketball, and we'll spend 2 minutes on the game last night against the Bucks and then dive into two separate topics. But first and foremost, give the B team for the Cavs a valiant effort credit for what they did against Milwaukee. No Harden, no Mitchell, no Mobley, still no Strus. I know the Bucks are without Giannis, but this is a fifth game in 7 nights for the Cavs. A few guys played big. Jarrett Allen was awesome again. We'll talk about him in a little bit. Dennis Schroder, who we'll talk about in a second, chipped in with 26 points to lead the backcourt scoring charge. And Keon Ellis hit 5 threes, but one thing that was evidently obvious and clear watching this game was they had to do a better job defending the three-point line. And the Cavaliers gave up 21 threes against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Sunday, did a much better job guarding the three-point line against the Knicks, and then they gave up 19 threes to Milwaukee last night. And give Milwaukee credit, they made some tough shots, but that is 50 threes in 3 games allowed by the Cavs, 40 in 2. And you're going to lose a lot of games, regardless of who is or isn't playing, if you allow your opponent to make 19 threes.
Yeah, you could tell by the end of the third quarter, they just looked tired on defense. They weren't closing out. They weren't cutting off the pass. And to your credit, Milwaukee still made tough shots at the end when they did get their defensive footing down. So I can't give them too much hate last night. They were down a lot of people. What'd you say, 5 games in 7 days?
Yeah, 5 and 7 right out of the All-Star break. Tough schedule luck, unfortunately, for the Cavs. But either way, it's a game you want to have, a game you probably should have won regardless of the guys missing. But it's one game, it's one loss. It's not the end of the world. The big news, and Ant, let's get into our first real topic, is the fact that James Harden is out, at least for a little bit of time. He missed last night's game against Milwaukee. He may miss more time. Jeff Stotts, who is one of the premier internet doctors, and I say that with all sincerity and seriousness. There's a lot of fake, phony internet doctors out here. Stotts runs a website that actually puts in the research and figures out the projected timetables. He said last night regarding the James Harden injury, the thumb is made up of 2, I think that's pronounced phalanges. Phalanges. Harden's break involves the distal phalanx, whatever. Basically, he broke the tip of his thumb and it's displaced. It is the best case scenario for a quick return. Players that suffer this injury and avoid surgery miss an average of 17 days. Shams Charania went on ESPN yesterday and said that Harden's going to try to play through this. It's not something that taking 2 weeks off is going to heal. It's an off-season issue that he will get fixed in the off-season. So the Cavs for the rest of the year will have a hindered James Harden to some capacity. It's worth noting it's on his right hand. James Harden predominantly a left-handed player, so it's not his shooting hand, so that's a much better outcome for the Cavs than not. But the question is, can the Cavs win a championship if James Harden is at 100%? And if so, how? Well, big picture, we got to see how much this impacts Harden. It's impossible for us to figure out how he'll play post-right thumb injury until we actually see him try and play post-right thumb injury. We've seen superstar players in the past deal with minor injuries and not have an impact their game whatsoever. You would never know they were even injured. So before we freak out, let's see how Harden looks with the slightly dislocated, slightly fractured tip of his right thumb. Because it's his right hand, the impact may be minimal. Literally may be minimal. Maybe it's a pain thing. He takes a game or 2 off, comes back by the end of the week against that home game against Detroit next Tuesday. Like, maybe that's the case. It's probably the best case scenario. But the Cavs do need as healthy a version of James Harden as possible if they're going to advance to the Eastern Conference and give a Western Conference team a legitimate fight in the NBA Finals. So, once again, I'm not going to overact to the Harden news until we know the actual severity of it, how he feels playing through it. He's been a warrior. He's played through injuries in the past. He's not a young gun who's kind of dealing with something like this for the first time. He understands his body better than most. But the other side of this is the now even more brilliant move of acquiring Dennis Schroder and Keon Ellis from the Kings in exchange for DeAndre Hunter, who, by the way, DeAndre Hunter's been shut down for the rest of the season by the Sacramento Kings. So who knows if that would have happened had he remained in Cleveland. But by acquiring Dennis Schroder, who had 26 points last night, leading the backcourt charge for Cleveland, the Cavs have a legitimate backup point guard who has already meshed well with Donovan Mitchell in an on-ball, off-ball scenario, who they can count on in a playoff situation. Is Dennis Schroder James Harden? No, he's not. And I want to make sure, I know you can't put on the screen, one does not equal another, but Dennis Schroder is about as good of a backup point guard as you're going to find in the NBA. And obviously, the Cavs need Harden. And I'm not taking away from Harden by complimenting Schroder here. But Dennis is a guy who's been in playoffs before. He's a veteran. He's a menace defensively. And when he's asked to carry more of a load offensively, he has proven time in and time again on multiple different teams with multiple different lineups around him that he can be a jolt of offense. And even if he's playing alongside Harden and Mitchell, there could be certain quarters in a playoff series where Dennis Schroder gives you a legitimate 12-point quarter that can completely change the momentum of a game and swing things back into Cleveland's favor. And we'll talk about what we saw from Schroder last night in a second, but how much faith do you have in Dennis as a guy who may be needed to take on a bigger role now if Harden's thumb is a hindering factor moving forward?
So I don't know if it's a hot take, but I was actually very excited about the move because Dennis Schroder is one of those players that ever since he was in OKC, when he first kind of got his name out there, I thought was a good player. I don't understand why this is his 11th team, and I'm not an expert on his career timeline, but he seems like a player who is good enough to be that backup, but isn't good enough to stay on a team because he's a good trade piece, right? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, he's certainly good enough. He's bet on himself a few times and turned down extensions trying to get another contract down the road, and they haven't necessarily panned out. There's the famous story of him turning down an $84 million extension with the Lakers, long-term deal, and then not playing well that season and then getting another one-year deal. You know, you hear people talk about it. Donovan Mitchell laughed about it. He said, I'm glad he's on my team because I hate playing against him. He's got a personality that doesn't always clash with others. He's been nothing but great to us so far. I have nothing personally bad to say about our interactions with Dennis Schroder, but there have been some stories and some stuff out there in the past that maybe he's not the greatest locker room guy. I don't know how in the past versus the current version of Schroder. Like I said, he's been incredible to us since we've gotten here. He's done some exclusive one-on-one interviews with different media members. Everyone seems to be happy he's here, but when you looked at the team prior to that deal, your backup point guards were Lonzo Ball and Craig Porter Jr. And in this scenario, prior to all deadline deals, let's say Darius Garland, before all these deals, was unable to go. You were relying on Lonzo Ball, who did more than I think he got credit for, but was still one of the worst offensive players in the entire league. And Craig Porter Jr., an unproven playoff commodity who struggles to shoot the ball in the regular season, so in the postseason, teams would leave him bare open. Those were your backup options, Ant. And if those were your backup options, good luck. Maybe Lonzo Ball finds his jump shot. Maybe Craig Porter Jr. can become a consistent three-point shooter in a playoff series. They have never proven that in the past to give you any level of confidence that you could withstand a prolonged injury to a hindered Darius Garland. At least with Schroder, you have a guy that you can count on. He's not going to score 26 points a night. That's unrealistic to expect. But he also can give you solid, quality point guard play and production on a night in, night out basis, while also giving you full court pressure from a defensive standpoint. He can be the pest. He's tough enough. He kind of has that playoff mentality, you know what I mean, Ant? He's not necessarily scared of the moment. I don't want to say he brings the best out of him, but he likes to fight. He likes the bright lights. He's talked about how he likes to get under guys' skin, and in the playoffs when they allow more physicality, that kind of benefits what his game offensively and defensively is. And even watching some of the game last night, the dude's lightning quick. He could get past. You switch on him, you put a big on him, he's turning the corner and making good things happen. Is he an elite passer? No. Is he an elite finisher? No. Is he an elite shooter? No. But he makes plays, and he puts pressure on the defense, and more importantly than anything else before we move on to our next topic, he puts the defense in a retreating position, right? And when you put the defense in a retreating position, whether it's in a switch on a pick and roll, whether you get a mismatch on the perimeter you like, you're forcing the defense to react to you. And when the defense is reacting to you, you are now in the position to pick and choose what's your best option. Do I attack? Do I draw help and kick? Do I like the one-on-one matchup where I tell everyone to spread out? Do I call in another screener to set up another pick and roll situation, to put them in rotational defense to find the best option for us offensively? That is something that the Cavaliers have with Dennis Schroder now that they didn't have before. And if Harden, and once again, I'm prefacing all of this with, If the thumb is a major hindrance, yeah, it significantly cuts into the Cavaliers' chances to win a championship. But if the thumb is just a minor thing that he can play through, and it doesn't really impact his overall efficiency and effectiveness, then having a guy like Dennis Schroder behind him, just to take a little bit of pressure off what you need from James Harden, is a gigantic, monumental win for the Cavaliers. And final thoughts on Schroder before we move on.
Yeah,
and Harden, however you want to phrase that.
I'll say it this way. I was upset about the thumb injury. I was happy to know that it wasn't as serious as it sounded as soon as I saw the initial report. But also from like a casual perspective, as a Cavs fan here who doesn't really break down the X's and O's of basketball like you do, having Schroder on the team to back these guys up and the energy that he brings, it gives me a sense of hope. It's not, okay, Donovan's going to come off the floor and we're going to go down by 10 points. So the same way it was when LeBron was here that last year, right? We've always kind of had that thing in Cleveland outside of those 4 years or 3 years with Kyrie and LeBron, when our star player went off, all right, just pack it up. When they come back on, we'll get back in the game. This team seems a little bit more well-rounded, and I know we're playing a gimped Milwaukee team last night, and we were down a bunch of players, but at the same time, like, we gave them a game, and we played hard defense for at least 3 of the 4 quarters, it looked like. So,
yeah, Schroeder's an energy guy. And like I said, there will be playoff quarters where Dennis Schroder can win you a playoff game based off one stint in the second quarter. On the flip side of that, he can shoot you out of a game too. That's kind of the yin and yang with a high-energy, high-variance player like Dennis Schroder, but he's a guy you'd much rather have than have to face in a playoff series. All right, the other thing we have to address today, Ant, Jarrett Allen just capped off the best month of his entire career. He was awesome again last night against Milwaukee, another double-double. 27 points, 11 rebounds, 10 of 15 from the floor. His last second shot, just milliseconds away from sending the game to overtime. And I can't help but think, with the way Jarrett Allen's playing, with the confidence in which Jarrett Allen is playing with right now, with the way the guards are trusting Jarrett Allen. They're making passes to J.A. right now that they haven't in the past. And these are guys that aren't necessarily new teammates. Yes, Harden is force-feeding the ball to Jarrett Allen. Dennis Schroder had a couple really nice passes in the pick and roll to Jarrett Allen last night. But guys like Sam Merrill, Jalen Tyson, Donovan Mitchell, the guys that have been in a system with J.A. for the last couple of years, are now finding ways to make sure Jarrett gets the ball in advantageous positions to score. That's important because the more and more J.A. plays with confidence like this, and the more and more 2010 games he puts up, the more and more doubles he stacks back to back to back to back to back to back. And the more and more I'm starting to think that regardless of who is in the lineup with Jarrett Allen, regardless of who the guards are, regardless of whether he's playing with Evan Mobley or another big, or regardless of whether it's 4 shooters around the one big with Harden at your point guard position, Allen has to be a focal point of this offense. He's too skilled. He's too big. He's too coordinated. He's too efficient, and he's too good of a decision maker. And on the decision-making part I'll get to in 1 second, to not continually make him a focal point of this offense. Should the Cavs be running plays for Jarrett Allen before Donovan and James? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But we have seen in the past that when he becomes just the 4th option on offense and he's just getting the scraps, he becomes disengaged at times. And it's not maximizing his abilities. And with Mobley out, we've seen him kind of slide into that 3rd. And it changes night to night, but that 3rd kind of on the pecking order offensive option. And what has he done, Ant? He's thrived. He has the 3rd highest field goal percentage for his career in the history of the NBA. I know this sounds crazy, but he is on the short list with a guy. Have you ever heard of the name Wilt Chamberlain? Does that name ring a bell?
It does ring a bell, yes.
Yeah, he's on the short list with a guy named Wilt Chamberlain for the most efficient and the most 2010 or 25 and 10 games in the history of the league. Is he Wilt? No. And should the Cavs throw their offense up in the air and just run post-ups for Jarrett Allen? No. But they have to utilize him early and often in the offense because he's too skilled to not maximize what he can do. And we know Jarrett Allen is capable now because we've seen it for an entire month. 9, 10 games. I forget the exact number, but the sample size is legitimate. I believe it was 10 games in February. Where he's a 20-10 guy, night in, night out. And a bad game for Jarrett Allen during that stretch was like 12 and 13 or 15 and 11 like he had against the Knicks, where it's still a double-double, where it's still impacting the both ends of the court, offensively and defensively, and it's still allowing everyone else to eat. Because if Jarrett Allen continues to get forced out in the pick and roll, defense is going to have to collapse, right, Ed? They're going to have to come in and try and do what OKC did, which was eliminate that pocket pass from the guard to the center. And you know what that does? That leaves open guys in the corner. And if they are going to come in and corral and help, even if Jarrett gets the ball in the paint, you saw last night against Milwaukee, you saw a couple nights ago when Jarrett Allen dominated, not the Knicks, who did they play before OKC? The Nets, in their first game back. That if they come in and corral, he's a good enough passer in the short roll to hit the corner shooter, to kick it back out to the wing to a Sam Merrill or a Donovan Mitchell to run the secondary options offensively, to get through those tertiary options in a play that Kenny Atkinson designs. And if you're not going to maximize what Jarrett Allen can do, what are you doing? Isn't the point of a player, Ant, to get the most from him on a night-to-night basis without disrupting everything else you want to do offensively? Right? Like, for example, Jalen Tyson, we've talked about at length, can be more of an offensive creator than he is when he's the fifth starter. But sometimes you got to pigeonhole guys to fit into what they do because that's what works best for the team. And right now, what works best for the team is highlighting and focusing Jarrett Allen as one of your primary offensive options and not necessarily running your offense through him, but making sure he is a vital point of the early offense. And the results speak for itself. And then, Ann, I want you to chime in on this. The results speak for themselves. The Cavaliers' offense, since they acquired James Harden, Keon Ellis, and Dennis Schroder, has been at its best when Jarrett Allen has been at his best. And to me, even with Mobley coming back and getting more minutes and figuring out how to play alongside him, and even with the great depth they have in the backcourt of guys who are capable of being creators and scoring, Allen is a weapon now, and he's not an afterthought. And whether or not he's the second, the third, or the fourth guy that they're trying to force-feed offense to and making sure he gets shots, he can't just be a guy that gets scraps anymore. He's officially earned, and I say earned intentionally, a seat at the table, Ant, to eat on his own, not just to get leftovers. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. He has become an absolutely new player since the James Harden trade, which out of everything I would have predicted from the James Harden trade was probably a little bit lower on the list. I know we've talked about how he makes big guys better around him, and Allen and Mobley were both probably going to be very big beneficiaries of this trade. I didn't expect as much from Allen. I was expecting maybe that this was going to be what helps Mobley take that next step, and it's looking like it's more Allen, and that's because Mobley's been out, so time will tell on that side of things. My biggest concern is when they're back to playing together more consistently, does he not get scraps now? Where does this leave Evan Mobley? What do you see happening with the two big lineup and James Harden, and who gets that priority now? Is it going to stay Mobley?
It's a great question. We've only seen Mobley and Harden play 2 games together, and Mobley's been on minutes restriction. So too small a sample size to make any kind of declarative information or statement, But after those two start the game together, Ant, Kenny, for the most part, even before the Harden trade, they'll start the game together, they'll start the third quarter together, but they play the majority of their minutes as a lone big. So I actually don't think, unless it's a closing lineup situation, how those two have to figure out like the perfect way to play each other, because it's really just for 4 minutes at the beginning of the first quarter, 4 minutes in the middle of the third quarter, or the start of the third quarter, where they actually kind of cross paths. For the most part, even last year, like Kenny has staggered their minutes, and looking at how they close games this year, up until about a month ago, I don't have the updated numbers, Allen was 11th on the team in minutes per game in the fourth quarter. Like, he was not playing in the fourth quarter because Kenny didn't like closing with two bigs. And now Kenny's got to figure out, who do I close with? Is it? And this is Earl calling. Should we take a call from Earl on air real quick?
Yeah, let him know we're live. Say what's up.
Earl, you are live on the Ultimate Cavalier Show. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not know you was recording.
You good.
Pass, let them know Black History Month. Jarrett Allen showed up again. Great game by the Cavs. I actually had a work question, but I'm going to leave it alone.
I will call you back as soon as you're done recording. Hey, make sure we put in the headline, Ultimate Cavs featuring Earl Malden, Earl the Pearl.
We got it.
I got it, man. Tell the fans I said what up.
You're live on speaker so they can hear you. So that is
what up to y'all?
That is our Black History Month correspondent, Earl the Pearl, calling into the Ultimate Cavalier Show as we wrap up Black History Month. Earl, I'll call you back in a minute.
Yes, sir.
As we were saying, it comes down now, Kenny, to figure out who his best closing lineup is. Is that two bigs? Is it just one? And if it is just one, who is it? And right now I lean towards Jarrett Allen just because of the way he's playing. And we'll see if Evan can get back to old Evan Mobley. But so far he's looked rusty in his few games back. In terms of the pecking order stuff, though, Jarrett Allen's a guy that needs someone to get him the basketball, right? Like, he's not an initiator by himself. And Dean Wade falls in the same category. And that's why sometimes you see such a variance in their offensive outputs, right? There are certain games where the defense dictates making the open pass to a Dean Wade in the corner. There are other games where the defense dictates the guard keeping it or passing it to the big. And the same thing goes with Jarrett Allen. Like, he's not a guy, and you can run a couple plays for him as like a post-up option, but for the most part, he gets his offense through the flow of the game. And the guards, and then this is a big emphasis on the guards. This is why James Harden has been so good at this throughout his career. The guards know and have to know that you'll get the best version of J.A. if you feed him early. Why? Because then he's engaged, he's locked in, he's more aggressive. I don't want to say he's more attentive. I don't want to say he plays harder, but he plays more assertive is the word I'm looking for when he gets going early. And as a coaching staff and as a teammate, if you know that, Ant, you got to feed him the rock. And I'll give you an example real quick, UCSS example, then we'll wrap up. I love Dustin, friend of the show. Obviously, he'll be in here back next week. There are certain topics that if I know I don't go to Dustin first on, he's not going to get a word in. But if you let Dustin start, then he gets his point off, and then he's a little more aggressive in trying to butt his way back into the conversation to either defend what he said, to counter what someone else says. Dustin's a little bit like Jarrett Allen in that sense. You got to feed J.A. early to keep him engaged for the rest of the conversation, for the rest of the game. You got to let Dustin get in on certain topics first to make sure he's fully locked in for the rest of the conversation. Apples to apples? No. But you can see in certain scenarios, and I'm sure you can find one in your everyday life that kind of meets the requirement for how Jarrett Allen needs to be handled moving forward. But to put a bow tie on it, Black History Month Jarrett Allen has been a freaking problem. And I think he's legitimately in line, Ant, to win the Eastern Conference Player of the Month for what he's done over the last 10 games. He's averaging, and those are his that's his game stats versus Milwaukee. You can see his season stats. He's about 15-8. In the month of February, he averaged 22 points and 12 rebounds per game while shooting 72% from the floor. That's his season stats. Bump it up by 7 points, bump it up by 3 rebounds, bump it up by 10 points in the field goal efficiency. That is a player who dominated the month of February and deserves all the love, all the flowers, and all the kudos he's going to get. And I appreciate you joining me. And I appreciate Earl for joining us on this edition of the Ultimate Cavaliers Show. We'll see you tomorrow on UCSS. And then we have a Friday game against Detroit in what should be a battle of Eastern Conference heavyweights. Let's hope James Harden's thumb is okay, because if he needs my right thumb, James, you can take it. Peace.